So Elin Kanhov is a researcher and musicologist working with the perspectives from the posthumanities, environmental humanities, critical theory, and post-structuralist philosophy. She's currently a postdoctoral researcher in AI music studies in the ERC-funded project Music at the Frontiers of Artificial Creativity and Criticism at KTH, Royal Institute of Technology, Stockholm, Sweden. So now I say very welcome, Elin. I hand over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sissi and Caroline and Tuija as well for organizing this webinar. We've been planning it for quite long and postponing it, but now I'm super excited to be here and to present to you, to this crowd, work that I've been doing both during my PhD and also work that I'm doing in my current position as a postdoctoral researcher at KTH. So now I will share my screen and sound, most importantly. And Caroline, if you can just give me a word to say that everything looks fine, that would be great. Because I can't see any thumbs up or anything.
Looks great, Elin.
Thank you. Okay, so first, a word of warning, or rather a word of encouragement. I have deliberately not over-decorated the slides in this presentation. As my work focuses on sound and music, I would like to ask you to engage with this seminar as a sonic event primarily, and I will make my best to present it to you in that way. With that said, feel free not to stare at the screen for the entire seminar and let your gaze drift elsewhere when needed. So in this webinar, I tie together two major challenges of the 21st century, and we'll use this time to think out loud and together with you about how music is affected by, responds to, and shapes these two challenges. Firstly, I'm talking about climate change, environmental crisis, and the Anthropocene. Throughout history, Western art music has drawn inspiration from nature, and nature has been conceptualized in music differently depending on the ideologies of the time. Today, contemporary composers engage with nature in music with the constant presence of climate change and environmental issues, which creates incentives to affirmatively explore the complex workings of nature and more than human relationships through their music. Secondly, we're now experiencing a rapid advancement in digital technologies, and not least in artificial intelligence. Turning to music and AI, the technological advancements seen today in this field are in many perspectives disruptive. Music made with or by AI poses threats to copyright and intellectual property. Streaming platforms are swamped with spam music, and AI risks homogenizing musical creativity and aesthetics. Still, AI also provides the potential to explore identities, create new entanglements between individuals and collectives, and transform human technological agency in the creative process. Although seemingly widely different aspects of the world we live in today, these two challenges can be understood as results of the same political, socio-cultural, and technological developments that we have experienced in the past half a century or so, tied together by late capitalism, globalisation, and neoliberal culture. In Rosie Braidotti's words, we're situated in a time defined by the intersection of the sixth mass extinction and the fourth industrial revolution. Tying together music, nature, and AI, this talk takes you through a journey of birdsong, outdoor percussion performance, more than human data ethics in sound ecologies, and audiovisual deepfake technologies. Through a posthumanist methodology, I explore how we can think with music to understand these entangled assemblages of the more than human world. We begin with encounters. An encounter, according to philosopher Gilles Deleuze, is something in the world that forces us to think. This something is an object not of recognition, but of a fundamental encounter. A starting point for my work is always in the encounter. Encounters are difficult to instantly grasp, and they disrupt our habitual way of thinking. When I encounter contemporary art music, it often forces me to think beyond my established frameworks, and I find myself reaching for concepts and contexts that, together with the artwork, teaches me something new. And this is not to quote-unquote unlock an inherent meaning within them, but to utilize and think with art and music to challenge established ways of being and knowing. In my doctoral thesis, I explore encounters not just between myself and my material, but also different kinds of encounters between music and nature. Central to my idea here is that music and nature are different kinds of phenomena, and music does not represent, mimic, or interpret nature, animals, more than human events or relationships. Such types of recognition would suggest that music is a mere commentary on the world. I'm sure you would all agree that art is much more than that. Art and music is transformative, productive, and challenging, and can foster new entanglements between music, more than humans, and nature, depending on how we engage with these phenomena. One example of an encounter or several simultaneous encounters can be found in Anna Kirse's tree opera or koku opera. In moments after sundown in an old-growth forest in Hyrynsalmi, Finland, koku opera is performed by the soloists Root, Trunk, Branches and Leaves and a mushroom choir. The performers sing in Latin, the language of Carl Linnaeus in his botanical taxonomy, as a way of speaking the language of the forest. Inspired by the most recent research in neurophysiology of plants and of deep forest ecology, this musical piece gives voice to the forest and its inhabitants and explores the scientific discovery of communication between trees through fungi. Latvian composer Anna Kirse's koku opera for 8 voices, chamber ensemble and electronic track premiered in 2019. The singers are from the Grammy Award-winning Latvian radio choir, who can sing demanding techniques such as overtones and ululations, and the ensemble includes Swedish musician Anna Petrini playing the rare Petzold contrabass recorder, with which she explores a range of extended techniques and sounds. Some of the performers sing from specially built platforms from fallen trees, and nature becomes part of the scenography as trees move in the wind and become part of the performance. Only biodegradable objects were used in the construction, which means this opera leaves no ecological mark on the place of its performance. Kirse's opera poses an encounter between music and nature that appears on several levels and poses several questions. There is an encounter between the performers, the audience, in this remote forest location, which becomes explicit in that everyone needs to travel there to participate. The performance site becomes integrated into the performance, giving nature a central role in the opera through the scenography and staging. The performers have tasks which are not normally required from classically trained musicians, as some are elevated upon platforms in trees and secured with climbing harnesses and ropes. The encounter between music and nature is also seen in the score, which includes symbols of animals and mosquitoes, leaving the interpretation of how to make these symbols audible through the individual instruments up to the performers. Furthermore, the characters of root, trunk, branches, leaves, and the mushroom choir have vocal parts that are inspired by their individual characteristics. But are these characters anthropomorphized, or are the singers turned into forest inhabitants? Kirse's opera also establishes an encounter between the materiality of the forest, sounds, and bodies on the one hand, and the discursivity within the language, symbols, and musical connotations, as well as the musical piece's title, Tree Opera, on the other hand. It shows how musical practice is embedded in cultural, social, and historical situations, but also demonstrates how music is pure sound, a material entity extending from performing bodies, instruments, and technology. The same can be said of nature, informed by cultural, social, and historical conceptions, but at the same time a place of material processes independent of human interpretations. Now, a word on transversal methodology. A transversal can be imagined as a line moving across a material discursive field. It's a way of cutting across a spectrum of phenomena, tying together previously untied knots of events, ideas, sounds, and affects, both mine and others. According to Deleuze scholar Ronald Bogue, a transversal addresses the in-betweens of the encounter, not to make sense or homogenize the encounter, but to intensify its differences. He writes, "The function of transversals is to assemble multiplicities, yet in such a way that the differences among entities are not effaced, but intensified." As researchers and writers amidst these phenomena, we both have the power and the responsibility to facilitate humble, affirmative, and ethical readings of our world. And so by a transversal methodology, I recognize music as an embodied, textual, situated, and sounding practice. And most importantly, music is not the result of culture. Music is amongst nature culture, inside, alongside, traversing it. And research can be a way of cutting across these phenomena. Birds and birdsong are likely the most common tropes of nature used in music historically, and composers have drawn inspiration from birds for centuries, from portraying the serenity of nature to letting birds represent springtime and jubilation. Birdsong has been portrayed mainly through instrumental or vocal onomatopoeia by drawing on associations that certain instruments have to birdsong, particularly that of the flute and piccolo. As early as in 1529, Clement Chanquin's chanson for vocal ensemble, Le Chant des Oiseaux, implemented vocalizations of chirps, tweets, and cuckoos interwoven in melodic lines. And of course, Olivier Messiaen is the birdsong par excellence of the 20th century, having transcribed, transformed, and musicalized birdsongs in more works than any other composer. Birds are nature's own musicians. They sing melodies and they perform, sometimes even on stage, like the tooth-billed bowerbird that makes a stage by turning leaves upside down in front of him and, placed behind the stage, calls at his court. Because of these capabilities of birds, we've tended to them as creatures with human traits, using the human as the measuring point. However, we have musically kept them at a distance, as symbols of nature that is still other than ourselves. By returning to birds and studying how these creatures have been engaged with in music historically, we can understand some parts of how more than human relationships with birds have been formed and are continuing to form through music. In Joan LaBarbera's Les Oiseaux qui chantent dans ma tête from 1976 for solo voice, I explore affinities between humans and birds through the voice, breath, tone, and extended vocal techniques. I ask, how are human-animal relationships conceptualized differently in this work compared to previous conceptions of birds in music? When analyzing this piece, I've developed the concept of transformational sounds, that is, sounds that move from one sonorous texture to another, often with smooth and gradual transitions. The main aspect of these sounds is their volatility, referring here to the work of Elizabeth Gross. Because the sounds transform, they cannot be defined as one specific sonority. The transformational sounds further emphasize the volatility in signification and function on what I term the edge of discursivity, when we must turn to and listen to materiality to form new discourses. As the sounds resist specification, they also resist being defined as sounding like one specific thing. The piece engages with bird sounds, yet it is not imitating birds nor attempting to represent specific birds. What would be more suitable to discuss here is that the piece engages with becoming's bird, drawing on the concept of becoming animal from Deleuze and Guattari's work. In this piece, we hear LaBarbera exploring the affinities between human and bird vocalizations. However, she does not continue romanticizing the image of birds through beautiful birdsong, but explores the ugly sounds of birds. Moreover, human-bird communication is established simultaneously as LaBarbera undergoes a desubjectification as a performer. She almost disappears behind her own vocalizations, as the birds she's vocalizing even seem to speak back to her. Is she vocalizing birds, or is she affording the birds a made-up language on their own? And I'd like you now to focus on these transformational sounds in the following examples. So I'm interested in those moments when it becomes difficult to say when something sounds more human-like and when it's completely bird-like. This poses questions of what we understand to be human and what we understand to be bird, and what we as creatures are capable of. In extension, these affinities demonstrate that the concepts and categorizations of human and bird are not rigid, but rather fluid. It's especially extended vocal techniques that promotes an exploration of human-bird affinities, as such techniques push the listener beyond established sonic norms and connotations. Note also the image I use for this webinar, which is also on the cover of my PhD thesis, which captures my idea of the encounter between human and bird in this piece. And this illustration was created by the talented artist Evelina Jonsson. Now, let's go outdoors again and explore the concept of coexistence. What do we strive for when we say coexistence? Does coexistence imply a complete harmonious relationship between all parts, an equilibrium not to be unbalanced? In the piece Inukswit by John Luther Adams from 2019, 9 to 99 percussionists go to an outdoor location to explore the encounter between the environment and the human through rhythms and territories. With Inukswit, I ask these questions about the human presence in the environment and the notion of coexistence between humans and nature. With Inukswit, I understand coexistence as a constantly reforming, rhythmic, more than human relationship without placing any values or hierarchical attributes on either side. In a performance of this piece, the audience is dispersed among the performers and they can walk around the performance space. As such, no person experiences the piece in the same way as anyone else, and no person experiences the entirety of the piece at once either. This further suggests that coexisting with one another cannot be done by standing still. We need movement and continuous reformation of relationships to get to know the ones around us. Inukswit does not strive for a human nature harmony or equilibrium, but recognizes the constant reconfigurations of the relations between humans and nature. There is an interesting conflict arising in this piece. On the one hand, there is a sonic output, that through the 70 minutes or so of its performance rises as a large wave of intense, chaotic, even violent interaction between percussion instruments, only to fall completely again at the end of the piece. The music even cuts out the sounds of the outdoor space, the birdsong, rustling leaves, and flowing rivers. When looking at the score and the individual parts, however, there is a rather simple and logical structure guiding the music forward, a palindrome, like a cycle returning to its beginning. And now I will play the first example, which is somewhere in the beginning of the piece. That was actually from the middle sections. We will listen a little bit to the beginning, where you can still hear the forest sounds of the performance location. And then you have that middle section where it becomes more intense, and we couldn't really hear anything of the natural surroundings. And this is then at the end of the piece. Inukswit stone structures have been built by the Arctic peoples, mainly the Inuit, in the northern parts of North America and Greenland for centuries. The structures often look similar to human bodies, with legs, a torso, and a head. The landscape in this part of the world primarily consists of tundra and is defined by few distinct natural landmarks. These structures have not only helped people navigate across the unmapped lands, but have also functioned as hunting aid, ritual sites, or just something to do when taking a break along the trail. And Adams has taken the shape of Inukswit stone structures and transferred them, as you can see here, into rhythmic musical material in this work. The rhythmic Inukswit figures also form cyclical patterns as layer by layer is repeated throughout. But with this superimposition of rhythmic layers, a sense of chaos successively ensues. And it's in the meeting between the cyclical layers that the individual parts begin to communicate and develop a communious rhythm, or a sense of coexisting with one another. So at the same time as the Inukswit figures are deterritorialized from being stone structures in the Arctic landscape to becoming musical rhythmic structures, they are also becoming territorialized as they invite the visitors of the musical landscape to navigate through it by creating a communicative rhythm with one another. Let us problematize for a moment why Adams, a white US American composer, turns to Inuit culture in his music. Is he appropriating a culture that is not his, or can we do a post-colonial and perhaps a post-human reading of this situation? When writing about this piece, I contextualize it within a broader history of American percussion music, which is a particular repertoire that grew during the 20th century in the US. Composers of various backgrounds took influence from a multitude of non-Western cultures, and their percussion music evolved into an eclectic mix of styles and instrumentations. This emergence of the percussion ensemble repertoire can be understood as a resistance against the Eurocentric music tradition that had guided art music for centuries, and the multicultural American society allowed for a different path. The composers that were leading this development also had a great interest in environmentalism and transcendental thought, which further connects this repertoire to ideas of nature and coexistence. Rosie Braidotti argues that European and Western identities need to ethically and politically account for their embodied and embedded situatedness. By drawing upon Deleuze and Guattari, she calls for a becoming nomad or becoming minoritarian of the European or Western subject. She writes, "The becoming nomad of Europe entails resistance against nationalism, xenophobia and racism, bad habits of the old imperial Europe. As such, it's the opposite of the grandiose and aggressive universalism of the past, which is replaced by a situated and accountable perspective. Such an endeavor should therefore not only affect the position of the other, but equally dislocate the position and the prerogative of the same, the former center. Such a repositioning of the Western composer subject can also be detected in the American percussion ensemble in general, and in Adams's music in particular. As such, the notion of coexistence that emerges in Inuksuit is not only one of constantly reforming relationships between different parts, it can also be read as a call for an anti-universalist coexistence that attempts to reposition the Western subject as the center. We are now turning towards questions of sound, technological mediation, and data ethics, whilst remaining in the context of more than human ecologies. In this paper, written together with our fellow co-hubber Petra Jeskelainen, we explore questions of human-non-human interaction through sound and data, and conceptualize non-human data ethics within a framework of the feminist data ethics of D'Ignazio and Klein. We live in a world full of sounds, sounds of the weather, of water, wind, animals, but also sounds of noise pollution, infrastructure, machines, and even war. And then there are sounds of voices, both of humans and non-humans. Sound can be a great source of knowledge in many aspects, although sound has not been prioritized as such historically compared to visual information. Now we have advanced technologies that can help us decode, enhance, and understand complex sound ecologies. Technologies can make humans able to hear sounds that we are otherwise incapable of hearing, such as infrasound of breaking icebergs, whales and elephants, and ultrasound of bats, mice and corals, as frequencies of such sounds lie outside of the human hearing range. Sounds can further be recorded, collected, manipulated, and shared as data. But how do we enter a more than human sound ecology ethically? Can we use more than human sounds in any way we like? And to whom does a sound really belong? What harm can different uses of sounds cause? How do we ask the non-human for consent when using their sounds for research, art, and conservational work? These questions are equally relevant for the previous examples I've discussed in this talk, as they are for any engagement with more than human sound ecologies. So in our paper, Petra and I suggest that we need to study how power is configured between various human and non-human stakeholders in sonic technological configurations, and how these technologies can be reimagined so that the non-human stakeholder gains more power. We also suggest that researchers should ask which species are studied and represented and which are not, and what sonic data are dominating in the data practices. And this paper, if you're interested, is attached to the announcement for this talk. So if anyone wants to read more, you're welcome to download it. And this question of data ethics takes us into the last section of my talk. Now turning to the human voice and deepfake technologies. Deepfakes have brought a lot of attention to AI technologies. The social and political danger with deepfake is worrying, to say the least, as disinformation and fake news become increasingly difficult to detect. In recent years, there's been an exponential rise in unconsented deepfakes of music artists. The vocals of Drake, The Weeknd, Rihanna, Taylor Swift, and Frank Sinatra, to name only a few, have been used without consent as training data on AI voice models to generate new fake songs. This has caused much debate around intellectual property and copyright law, as the legislation around music and AI has not caught up with the technological development. Culturally, deepfakes can therefore be understood as fraudulent, as stealth of identities, and they bring about them a real danger in terms of politics and societal trust. The normative behavior of AI, moreover, contradicts the plead for creativity that is often associated with AI marketing. The question then is, can AI only replicate, or can it function as a productive tool to question notions of normativity, subject formation, and vocal authenticity? In the following examples, I argue that deepfake technology can facilitate new material discursive entanglements between voices, bodies, identities, and individuals and collectives. By letting a voice transform through one or multiple others. In my analysis, I turn to the concept of diffractions to understand the aesthetic potential in deepfake audio and visual content. Diffractions, in contrast to reflections or representations, map the disruptive and transformative realizations of identities, voices, and bodies, etc. Here referring to the work of both Barad Haraway and Min Ha. Spawn is Holly Herndon and her partner Matt Dryhurst's AI baby, developed with the help of coder Jules Laplace. It's trained on her and Dryhurst's voices. They have also trained Spawn on a choir where all singers are attributed. Spawn can therefore express various vocals and is not tied to one particular vocal identity. Herndon and Dryhurst understand Spawn as an AI baby, as they need to nurture it and feed it with data to get to know it, and for the voice model to get to understand the data it is fed. The song Godmother is sung by Spawn, where the AI baby has listened to the music of her godmother, electronic artist and producer Elin. In this piece, you can hear the idiosyncrasies of the neural network, and we can hear and feel the algorithms, to quote Ruckenstein, at work where Herndon's voice becomes the instrumental music with stutters, hums, and murmurs, and the instrumentals become her voice through beats and rhythms. In this piece, Spawn has picked up patterns in Herndon's voice and speech, as well as patterns in Jalen's music, and combined them into something that none of these artists could have made otherwise. It sounds like a kind of more than human beatboxing. And in the music video, the two artists' faces are also merged with AI technology, entangling their facial structures and identities in a way that aligns with the music. And I will now move across to here and play you the beginning of this piece. In the music video to Eternal, we see glimpses of the choir that helped train Spawn in Berlin, where Holly Herndon lives. The video partially uses face alignment, an algorithmic processing that recognizes geometrical facial structures in digital imagery. And this can be interpreted as a comment on surveillance society and visual manipulation that deep neural networks can be used for. The shaky, blurry, and fluidly interchangeable images of faces further destabilize notions of identity. And this combination of non-static facial imagery with a voice model trained on a choir creates an entanglement between individuals and collectives that points to subjectivity as something diffractive and indeterminate. And I will play you a minute or so from this piece as well. Right, so I will now get back to this presentation. So in a similar way to how diffractions are to be perceived as continuities rather than cuts, we can analyze these uses of deepfake technologies as diffractive continuations and explorations of vocal identities, rather than as copies or representations of them. And I'd like to end now by quoting Haraway. Reflexivity has been much recommended as a critical practice, but my suspicion is that reflexivity, like reflection, only displaces the same elsewhere, setting up the worries about copy and original and the search for the authentic and really real. What we need is to make a difference in material semiotic apparatuses, to diffract the rays of technoscience so that we get more promising interference patterns in the recording films of our lives and bodies. With these final words from Haraway, I would like to make a call for posthumanist music studies, and I hope that my talk has demonstrated how posthumanist methodologies and thinking can be used to engage with music to cope with the challenges that we are facing now in the 21st century. Thank you very much. And
wow.
some references, if anyone's interested, I would just leave them there. Well, actually, I will stop sharing, and if anyone wants them, let me know, because I want to see your faces now.
Thank you so much, Elin. This was truly amazing and also so wonderful to engage with sound in that way and also to listen and not only looking.